What's my theory on whether or not Moses existed? Pretty simple one. Quite literally, the books of Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy from the modern Bible are literally the only source text we have for both Moses, the character, and also the Exodus talked about in those books. There are zero additional ancient sources to corroborate the story, and of course, archaeological evidence doesn't support it whatsoever either. This is why the predominant number of scholars have concluded that Moses was nothing more than a legendary character, and the story of the Exodus was a myth. First of all, there's no mention of Moses or the Israelites in any Egyptian record for that period. Keep in mind, the Egyptians were like meticulous record keepers. They have a ton of records from that period on history, culture, and religion, and yet nothing about Moses or the Exodus. No papyrus, no pillars, no wall paintings, nothing. Second, there is zero evidence of a mass exodus of people from Egypt to the land of Canaan. Keep in mind, the Bible numbers 600,000 men, which would have come out to about roughly 2 million Israelites altogether moving through the desert. They should have left behind campsites, graves, pottery, weapons, carcasses. Based on the direction they were traveling and the areas they were moving through, they should have encountered the Edomites, the Ammonites, the Moabites, yet these other cultures who were in that areas never recorded ever encountering any of these Israelites whatsoever. Not to mention, those tribes would have also resisted their passage. Third, even the stories that come from Moses' literature are also bunk. The story of Joshua specifically. For example, the city of Jericho would have been completely abandoned by 1500 BC, 100 years before Moses would have showed up, and by that time there were no inhabitants and no walls whatsoever. It's also important to recognize that the story of Moses is not in any way unique in this regard. Many different cultural histories have shown that there's stories about legendary figures who lead their culture and their people groups from bondage into freedom. Those stories are really just intended to create a sense of hope, create a sense of identity for a people group to help explain the cultural context of their belief systems. Inspirational stories, really. I pulled up a couple of quotes here. Let me read one or two of them to you. I think you'll enjoy. The biblical Moses is a composite figure to whom has been attached all manner of traditions, many of them contradictory or implausible. William H.C. Pratt, professor of history and Judaic studies at the University of California. There is no evidence for Moses' existence outside the Bible, and since the vast majority of biblical scholars accept that all of the stories about Moses were written way after he supposedly lived, we have no evidence that connects to him directly. Hector Avalos, professor of religious studies at Iowa State University. One more bonus one for you. There is no historical evidence outside of the Bible, no mention of Moses outside of the Bible, and no independent confirmation that Moses ever existed. Michael Coogan, lecturer on the Old Testament at Harvard Divinity School. My opinion on Moses is that the sooner Christians realize that the entire basis of their faith system is based on mythology, the better off we'll all be.